Okay, just testing to see if everybody can hear me. I can ask the forum host to confirm.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. And you guys can see my screen?
Yep, sure can.
Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Dr. Simon Cleveland, and today I'm going to present an actual cybersecurity leadership framework that we developed in our study in order to address some of the most common problems related to how leadership is supposed to react in situations prior to cyber threat. In this presentation, what I will attempt to do is give you a quick overview about the actual paper, talk a little bit about the research question for the study, and then I'm going to investigate the cybersecurity vulnerabilities and the leadership failures that have occurred over the past year or so, some of the biggest ones. Talk briefly about the NIST Cybersecurity Framework to give you an overview of how we took that study forward. Then I'm going to examine in detail the leadership theory, and then finally I'm going to map those to the actual NIST Cybersecurity Framework in order to develop this new framework that we call Cybersecurity Leadership Framework. So I know that we have some limited time and I want to get into this. Cybersecurity is a critical issue for all companies in today's digital landscape, and executive leadership faces challenges that their predecessors actually escaped. Just in the last half a decade, cyber attacks have become more visible to the public, and the threats and the attacks call for a more proactive approach from leadership. However, when risk management fails, the leaders need to be prepared to handle the incidents after they occur. And so many studies have actually focused primarily on the technology measures, how to prevent cybersecurity incidences, etc. But we found that there's actually a gap in the literature that addresses appropriate leadership skills required for each of the stages in a cybersecurity incident preparation and response. So this study attempts to address the following question. What type of leadership should be applied in the various cybersecurity preparation and response stages in order to educate cybersecurity leaders in developing a prescriptive approach to addressing future cyber attacks? So in order for us to address these research questions, we leveraged the existing cybersecurity framework proposed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. We analyzed leadership theory to highlight the various leadership styles. And as I mentioned, we mapped these against NIST framework. And that culminated in a framework which I will demonstrate to you shortly. In 2016, the Industrial Control Systems Cyber Emergency Response Team, which is a component of the Department of Homeland Security, reported over 2,300 vulnerabilities from security researchers, vendors, and public resources. And to respond to these vulnerabilities, the team released 185 advisories and 17 alerts. And the sector that received the highest vulnerabilities impacts were energy, critical manufacturing, commercial facilities, and water and wastewater systems. In 2017, the same team conducted over 170 assessments, and their report showed that the most prevalent weaknesses included boundary protection, identification and authentication, allocation of resources, physical access control, and at least functionality. And so in 2017, we also saw some of the biggest hacks to date. Many of you recall the Equifax, where criminals penetrated one of the largest credit bureaus in the world, and in July of 2017 and stole the personal data of 145 million people. It was considered among the worst breaches of all time because of the amount of sensitive information exposed, including social security numbers. And what happened there is the company leaders only revealed the hack 2 months after the attack had happened. And the Equifax breach actually raised concerns over the amount of information data brokers collect on consumers. But what was interesting also to note is that the Equifax CEO, Richard Smith, who stepped down after the breach, was testified to Congress and blamed the security failure on one person who had since been fired, which kind of gives you an idea about the fact that the company had no idea what was going on when it came down to cybersecurity preparation. Another one that was very, very visible threat and hack was the hack with Yahoo, where 3 billion accounts were exposed to hackers in 2013. And in 2017, the CEO at the time, Marissa Mayer, told Congress that the company only found out about the breach 3 years later. and reported that there were only 1 billion accounts that were hacked, when in reality there were three times as much. So the company leadership still does not know who was responsible for that hack. Very interesting information there. Anyone also remembers the WannaCry attack, which spread to more than 150 countries last year and leveraged some of the leaked NSA tools? Well, in May of that year, the ransomware targeted businesses running outdated Windows software and locked down computer systems. And they demanded, the hackers behind this threat demanded money, and they locked more than 300,000 machines. And again, leadership for many, many organizations were caught unprepared to respond in reasonable timeframe. There's also the Uber cover-up, which occurred in 2016, where the hackers stole the data of 57 million Uber customers, and the company paid $100,000 of ransom. And the breach wasn't made public by the company leadership until November of 2017, a year later. And so Uber now is facing questions from lawmakers, and 3 senators are introducing a bill that could make executives face jail time for knowingly covering up data breaches. So this is demonstrating that there is a very big problem when it comes down to not only companies being prepared to face the hacks, but also how the leadership is responding to these hacks. Let's talk briefly about the actual NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Recognizing the ongoing threats to the United States critical infrastructure resulted in that preliminary cybersecurity framework proposed by NIST in October of 2013 and then formalized in 2014. And the framework is intended to help leaders improve their organization's cyber resilience and determine the state of their cybersecurity readiness, assess potential gaps and risks, and recommend specific tools to address potential threats. The framework, as you can see, consists of several core functional areas. And to date, the focus of the framework has been to use specific drivers to consider the cybersecurity risks and lead cybersecurity activities of this organization. However, the framework doesn't provide a prescriptive approach as to what leadership skills apply to each of these proposed functional areas. So before I expose the actual leadership framework that we developed, I'd like to kind of do a quick overview of the leadership theory that we know that exists today about what leaders are. So let's examine some of these. The first one is the theory-wide leader. Theory-wide leader is someone who doesn't need to remind employees that work needs to be completed, but rather nurtures these employees and helps them advance their careers. So McGregor saw the theory-wide managers as those that hold assumptions that workers care about the organization and will seek responsibility and exercise self-control. And the theory Y also have the ability to be innovative and creative. These leaders contribute positively toward more participative decision-making, ultimately benefiting the organization. And theory Y leaders offer a baseline level of competence and engender far higher level of trust in their employees. People have a deep-rooted need to do a job. That's what they believe in, the leaders. They believe that people are honest, they can be trusted, that employees can be treated with dignity and respect, and they can become committed when they're involved in the actual solving of problems. So that's the first one. The next one that I'll review is the transformational, inspirational leader. Leaders should establish something called a strong Stackelberg equilibrium. So this concept suggests that a leader should be capable of inducing a favorable equilibrium by selecting a strategy arbitrarily close to the equilibrium that causes the follower to strictly prefer the desired strategy. So that's a mouthful. So in other words, leaders should really possess a strategic acumen in order to impact the strategies of their followers. With regards to the cybersecurity arena, such leaders can use both inspirational vision and incentive structure. When it comes to a vision that inspires the followers, these leaders should be cognizant of the set of organizational values in order to build cyber resilience. To influence the behaviors of individuals, these leaders can incentivize them in order to construct a cybersecurity mindset. Inspiring leader is perceived by others to be someone who has knowledge and sensitivity of the problems that need to be addressed. Furthermore, an inspiring leader is not someone who micromanages and forces others to follow, but is the one who guides. Inspirational leaders who practice such qualities ensure that their organizations create a safe place where employees remain committed to the mission of the organization and motivated to follow their vision. There's also the competence. In addition to passion to help others, inspiring leaders are also competent leaders. Competence is a kind of thirst for knowledge and self-improvement that demonstrates skills needed to overcome challenges. Competent leaders are transforming leaders. Transformational leaders stimulate their followers to be innovative and creative by questioning assumptions, reframing problems, and approaching old situations in new ways. Transformational leaders focus on transforming employees, such as leaders who truly excel and those who perform at the highest peak. Transformational leaders focus on tasks. They help understand what motivates and influences employees. How to coach employees to improve performance, how to help employees understand strategy, how to measure what employees want, monitors employees' progress and assesses value rather than numbers. In addition, we also have mentorship in these types of leadership style. Some of the literature suggests that leaders are mentors who focus on developing strong relationships with organizational members. And this quality instills in a leader to guide, mentor, and provide feedback to the managers and their employees to help them face their actions from another perspective. Furthermore, these types of quality helps the leader to build trust with the employees through feedback and guidance. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the servant leader. One of the most distinctive qualities of a servant leader is his or her passion to help others. And this type of quality associated with more closely with servant leadership. To lead effectively, one must first serve, and that means that legitimate needs of others is the essence of what it means to serve. This quality focuses on employees and their development. Leading is a form of guiding and supporting and understanding and being genuine, developing relationships and building a community. The servant leader abandons his own preconceptions of how best to serve and then waits and listens until others define their own needs and can state them clearly. A leader builds people through service when he genuinely puts people first, viewing them as humans worthy of dignity and respect. The advantages of the servant leadership model is altruism and simplicity and self-awareness. There is moral sense of concern for others, reducing the complexity engendered by putting personal desires in conflict with those of followers. This style requires reflective thinking or moral imagination, grounded in sensitive awareness of one's and of the followers who interact in a continuous process of mutual influence. And the leader talks, listens to others, and from the ongoing conversation emerges a shared vision and a better one for the servant leadership. And let's talk a little bit about the authentic leadership theory. So there are also authentic leaders, and these types of leaders are self-aware, mission-driven, and focused on the long-term results. And authentic leadership has achieved authenticity through self-awareness and self-acceptance, and authentic actions and relationships. Authentic leadership formulate and nurture authentic relations with followers and associates. These relationships are characterized by transparency and openness and trust, guidance toward worthy objectives, and an emphasis on follower development. Authentic leaders are also posited to draw from the positive psychological states that accompany optimal self-esteem and psychological well-being, such as confidence and optimism and hope and resilience, to model and promote the development of these states in others. And moreover, they apply a moral perspective to lead by example as they communicate through their words and deeds high moral standards and values. In addition to authentic leadership, we also have the adaptive leader, and that's going to be the last theory that I'm going to talk about. The adaptive leadership focuses on the needs for change within the organizations and encourages actions that disrupt the status quo in order to incite forward momentum. This style proposes that leaders adapt to the situations at hand in order to mobilize employees to address difficult scenarios and successes. Such leaders are persistent, they're methodical, and able to accept disequilibrium and discomfort. Adaptive leadership is based on the premise that leaders is more of a process rather than individual personal capability. This process requires people to focus on the specific problems at hand, and to modify the way they have worked in the past. This type of leadership should compel all stakeholders involved to work towards a solution through debate and creative thinking, identifying the rewards and opportunities and challenges that are faced. The outcome of the process should be a positive change that is non-threatening to those responsible for generating and executing the change. Adaptive leaders focus on process rather than the person. This model employs the knowledge of all who have a vested interest in motivating the organization to a higher level and provides a framework for attaining employee commitment to actively participate in seeking and implementing solutions to challenges. So by engaging people to become active participants in the change process, adaptive leaders actually offer a route around historical constraints that reinforce the way change has been traditionally introduced. So having examined the actual adaptive and the various other leadership strategies, we mapped those types of skills that are most prevalent in each of these styles to the actual NIST functional areas and the NIST's actual framework. And we came up with this proposed cybersecurity leadership framework in the type of leadership skills required for each of the various functional areas from the NIST framework. So for example, when we talk about the identifies area of the NIST framework, typically NIST proposes that this is where the development of the organizational understanding to manage cybersecurity risk to systems, assets, and data and capability occurs. And this is essentially where there's an understanding of the business context and the resources that support critical functions, as well as the related cybersecurity risks that enable an organization to focus and prioritize its efforts. And they're consistent with its risk management strategy. And based on our analysis of the literature and analysis of the various leadership models, we actually argue that this particular functional area can benefit the most from inspirational leadership styles theory that have primarily a competence-based skills. There's also the occurrence of adaptive skills as well, and some authentic leadership at that stage. But the argument here is that any type of leadership during the identification stage needs to be primarily inspirational with a more of a strong competence-based characteristic. In the second model, in the second functional area, which is protect, typically what NIST says that this is where the development and implementation of the appropriate safeguards occur to ensure the delivery of critical infrastructure services. And to protect the function, this supports the ability to limit or constrain the impact of a cybersecurity event. And then essentially what happens here in these categories is we have access controls and awareness and training and data security and maintenance and protective technologies. And based on our analysis, we argue that the most applicable leadership style for this particular function area is authentic leadership. There are some occurrences and some minor inspirational and transformational qualities that could be useful in this particular function, but primarily the strong, authentic leadership style with the exhibited skills that I discussed earlier are highly recommended for leaders to be able to manage better in this specific functional area. In the detection function area, we have the development and implementation of the appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event. This is where we have a lot of anomalies and events occurring. We have security continuous monitoring. We have detection processing. And so we get back to this whole transformational idea again here. The idea that strong competence about the skills required and technical skills in particular required in that specific function. But at the same time, a transformational leader that can really actually look at the big picture and can actually guide the employees toward that whole transformational vision through detecting the different threats and preparing to address these. There is some adaptive qualities that are recommended in this particular leadership formulation. Also some resilience, but again, strong transformational, strong competence are key areas in this particular functional area. Next, we have the respond. And this is where we have the development and implementation of appropriate activities to take action regarding a detected event already. And the response function supports the ability to contain the impact of a potential cybersecurity event. This is where we're talking about a lot of response planning, lots of communication occurring, lots of analysis of a response to a threat that's occurred, lots of mitigation, lots of improvement. This is where we are mentioning the Stackelberg equilibrium, where leaders really need to find ways to actually respond in equal way to the actual attackers. And there is this inspirational qualities that are required by the leaders, these adaptive types of qualities. We see kind of a blend of different types of leadership styles in this particular response function, but primarily we need that Stackelberg equilibrium to occur, strong exhibit by the leader in this particular situation in order to be able to respond to the threat quickly and efficiently. And finally, we have the recover function. This is where the development and implementation of appropriate activities occurs to maintain plans for resilience and to restore any capabilities or services that were actually impaired due to a cybersecurity event. And the recovery function basically supports timely recovery to normal operations. And this is where we have recovery planning and, again, lots of improvements, lots of communication. And we argue here, based on our analysis, that the leaders here really need to be resilient leaders. They need to be able to see past the event that has occurred. If there has been a compromise to the actual infrastructure, they actually need to go out there and communicate that. And it should be a very quick communication, as we previously had noted. You're waiting a year, waiting 2 years, waiting 3 years to demonstrating a lack of knowledge about what had occurred, who was responsible, is potentially the worst type of thing that a leader can do in this case. That's why we're seeing some recommendations here for some qualities, such as adaptation to the situation, promoting some authentic approach to how to solve these problems. Again, leaders need to be more of a mentors in this case, rather than putting a blame game. They need to actually coach their employees on how to kind of go through that situation that has occurred. But again, we stress the importance of an actual resilience in this case from our leaders. And that kind of concludes the actual demonstration of the proposed leadership framework. I'm going to open it here for questions. If anybody has some kind of questions to ask about the study in particular. And looks like we've got some. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I hope you found that very, very friendly and user-friendly. There's a question from Clark. What type of leaders are most security leaders and managers before the big data breaches? How about now? That's a good question, Clark. When we investigated the literature, we're finding out that inspirational and transformational leaders, as you will see, kind of bleed across these types of skills, bleed across the majority of the functional areas. So it really kind of, the recommendation from this study would be that organizations and senior leadership in this case should really invest a lot in developing these qualities for inspirational and transformational leadership styles. They need to teach their leaders not only competence about the actual discipline, about the actual technology, have the actual leaders who are skilled at the technology that is being used to prepare, to detect, and to respond. But they also need to be inspirational. They actually need to kind of demonstrate a vision for how they believe the organization should be prepared. They also need to be transformational in a situation where an actual threat has occurred, or the organization is dealing with a threat, as to how can they carry the weight of that across the organization to motivate their employees to persevere through that, and at the same time to be cognizant enough of the stakeholders who will get the actual result of the impact, if it's a credit card company, or in the case of Equifax, if it's people like you and I who have social security numbers that are going to lose that information. How are these leaders going to inspire me and comfort me and coach me and help me go through that situation? So strong inspirational, strong transformational, skills that we see across the entire gamma of different types of functional areas. So good question, I appreciate that. Any other questions? Anytime. Okay, I'll assume that we are good to go at this point. If anybody's interested in learning more, I'm going to pass my information to the forum host, and you can email me directly. I can provide you with more information about the paper. One more question. How about dangerous type of leaders? That's a good one. Dangerous types of leaders would actually be exactly the opposite of this, if you think about this. Very, very difficult to have to deal with leaders who are, first of all, not competent in what they're hired to do. So think about the Equifax, or think about the Uber, for example. The dangers, or Yahoo for that matter. I'm a Yahoo user, and I know my account was exposed. The dangerous type of leader is somebody who really is more of a deceptive nature. They hide, they look to better themselves. It's something called the Theory X in the leadership model. Somebody who really kind of believes that people need to be constantly reminded that they're worthless or not useful, and constantly punishing the employees. That's a dangerous type of leader. Certainly not the type of leader you want to implement in a situation where you really need to come up with creative solutions to resolve a cyber threat that has never been experienced for that scenario, or somebody who is actually not mentoring, the anti-mentor, if you wish, that really kind of goes against their employees and in punishing them from coming up with the creative ideas. That's something that the stifling type of leader, that would be a completely dangerous type for cybersecurity. We need open-minded individuals to a degree, even exhibiting those servant type of skills where they listen to their employees, especially because this is where situations will occur that nobody has ever prepared for. You can have the most excellent risk management plan and still not be prepared for the next cyber threat. Somebody who has gone out there and come up with this most creative way of hacking a system that potentially crowdsourced it in a way that now suddenly the organization is dealing with multiple threats from multiple individuals on multiple fronts. And at that point, having somebody who's stifled, somebody who doesn't believe in their employees, who's not a mentor, who's not competent, those are the worst types. That's a good question. I appreciate that one. Anybody else? I think we are coming up on, if I'm not mistaken, 11. So it's 2:30 Eastern time zone. We still have some time. Like I said, if anybody wants to ask any questions, if not, reach out to me via email, and I can provide you with some more details on that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Simon. I was going to thank you for presenting today. Do you have anything else to add?
No, that's it. I appreciate that. And, in my next presentation, which will be in October, I'm actually going to propose a framework on post-incident. So, we look here for preparation of how to address the scenarios that may happen. And then I will propose an additional framework in October on how to deal with incidents that have already occurred from a leadership perspective. I appreciate the time today, though.
Okay, great. Awesome. I just want to reiterate that this is going to be the last CAE forum presentation. We're taking a break off in the summer, and then I think we're going to be starting up again in September. I posted the link in the chat box where you can find all of the materials from both of the presentations today. And if you guys have any questions or comments, you guys can always email me at caeforum@caecommunity.org. Thank you all for showing up today.